So veteran Fox News anchor Chris Wallace left that network after 18 years on the job. And he says life at Fox had become unsustainable for him. Quote, "I'm fine with opinion, conservative opinion, liberal opinion, but when people start to question the truth, who won the 2020 election, was January 6th an insurrection, I found that unsustainable." That's what he said in this New York Times interview.
By the way, the 2020 election was not stolen.
Not stolen, right? We have to just to make sure everybody knows that, because
legitimately elected president.
We wouldn't want to inflame any mega tech companies on which this show appears. So
everybody got it?
We're all good now?
We got it?
Let's go ahead.
Biden president legitimately.
I think we did it.
Got it? Okay. All right, here to discuss, Batya Ungar-Sargon, a deputy editor at Newsweek and the author of Bad News. Welcome, Batya.
Thanks for having me.
And so what's your take on this?
I would love to see people, quitting their jobs from CNN and the New York Times over the ethical issues there, over having gotten so much wrong about COVID, over the just total destruction of America's small businesses, over, the learning loss of Black and Hispanic children due to errors that were promulgated, by those outlets. I just think that this is so, like, to hang your hat on this, to take an issue of, dressing up something that is actually just a difference of opinion, and then leave Fox, which is the number one show viewed by Democrats, by the way, for CNN, plagued by scandal, plagued by actual, journalistic ethical violations. To me, I just see this as, really not really worthy of respect. What do you guys think?
But so difference of opinion implies that it's a genuinely held opinion. And I think that we have a ton of evidence from text messages from Sean Hannity and that whole coterie of Fox News hosts that they actually knew and understood that January 6th was awful for their entire movement. Like, we have that. And also that they understood that the election was clean. Like, we have those text messages. Was it Hannity who was texting to Mark Meadows or whoever else, like, please tell him to stop talking about the election. Like, it's over, it's done, he lost. Somebody get through to him. So it's not a difference of opinion in that sense. They all really knew that the election was fair.
Well, and that those messages suggested those people knew that it was not Antifa, it was not Democrats,
right.
It was not the deep state, but it was their own supporters doing that stuff on January 6th, which then the subsequent.
Whereas I wonder when it comes to the pandemic stuff that you're talking about, I would bet that Sanjay Gupta and the others at CNN and MSNBC, if you catch them in private text messages and in private conversations, they're probably saying the same things. Like, they believed in the lockdowns, they believed in, the general kind of democratic response.
Oh, and now you're losing me, right? Well, we'll let Batya.
Yeah, Batya. What do you think? And maybe there's some variation among the crew.
So I watched Fox News all throughout January 6th, and they all condemned it. I mean, everybody who was sending Trump text messages then went on that night to say that it was a horrible thing to have witnessed and a horrible thing to have happened. The things that later came out, so he specifically mentioned Tucker Carlson's special on Fox Nation, Patriot Purge, as the reason, for leaving, that seems like it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, that episode, it was, what did he do in the show? I mean, he didn't say it hadn't happened. He pointed out to evidence that I think a lot of us would like to know more about the level of the FBI's involvement in January 6th. That's not to say that, 700 people didn't commit crimes for which they've all been prosecuted, but that is a legitimate question, don't you think, to ask? I mean, you don't think that's a legitimate question to pose?
Well, as I've said, it goes all the way to the top. It was entirely January 6th fomented by the government, by President Trump, the president, the person. Like, yes, it was engineered by the government. It was engineered by the sitting president. Case closed. Mystery solved.
Got him. He would have gotten away with it too, if not.
Yeah, but so I think. I can understand Chris Wallace wanting to get out of that environment. The part of it where I think I would agree with you, or what I think you're saying, is that, but then to slot himself into CNN as if there are no flaws in the reporting there, doesn't make a lot of sense to me, especially given, and he kind of talks about it in this interview. There's a line where he expresses polite frustration, he's a polite guy, about the state of CNN right now with Zucker having to leave, but slotting himself into this network where there are these very looming large ethical questions about how the Cuomo stuff was handled. I think that is where there's hypocrisy and then some.
Yeah. I mean, the head of the network at CNN was making, back channel deals with Andrew Cuomo, who was in the process of overseeing, the death of 20,000 defenseless seniors, right? And undergoing all of this sexual harassment stuff, which, we've talked about that as well. But, just the handshake agreements, the coziness between the network and the politicians that they were supposed to be objectively reporting on, that's not a problem for Chris Wallace because it's the right politicians, right? Because it's the right side. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. And as for the nighttime shows, I think that, as we've, discussed in earlier segments today, there's a lot of stuff that is being asked on nighttime shows at Fox News that is actually turns out to later be true and relevant. That is just, there's a total taboo on covering it on the liberal side of things because of where our domestic politics are at. Do they get everything right? No. Is our job as reporters to be open and to question things and to question everything? Yes. And essentially he has chosen a side based on politics that does not have its hands any cleaner, is I guess the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and I think if I were going to make a version of your point, I'd go to Russiagate and to the coverage of the Steele dossier. CNN and MSNBC in particular, the way that they covered that, it was clear that this was unsubstantiated, that these were unsubstantiated allegations. Like nobody disputed that fact. And you could look into the dossier and you could see basic mistakes that were apparent. That it was contradictory on its face at times. And so all you had at that point was basically a document that was put together by a private investigator making allegations. And both of those outlets just ran wild with those allegations, occasionally caveating them as just allegations, but often just saying no, often taking them as fact and then connecting the dots, very much like Glenn Beck from the 2010s with his board and the Soros and the SEIU and and Acorn, and he's figuring it all out for everybody. I think it's fair to say that jumping from one conspiracy world into another leaves you without a whole lot of room to complain.
And it's not just about what they covered, but what they didn't, right? I mean, by not covering the Hunter Biden laptop story, by this just liberal media, big tech, and the Democrats all colluding together to completely silence that story, so that Americans, 2/3 of whom today say that is actually a big deal and a big story, they didn't get to hear about it. I mean, that was a really big deal. That was deeply unethical. And not a single person has taken responsibility for those decisions and said, look, here's where we got this wrong and here's how we're going to do better. They just changed the subject like they do with COVID, right? When they get something wrong. And I think that, Chris Wallace dressing this up as some sort of ethical decision, I just think that that's really cynical and difficult to agree with and to believe.
Yeah, and the Hunter Biden laptop is another instance where you had, pretty soon after it came out, there was plenty of internal evidence within it that it was authentic. That because you had
there was no evidence that it wasn't authentic to begin with, because they didn't even deny it. They didn't deny it. They never said it was.
Right. There was it once. It was nuts.
There was that plus his business partner also gave access to emails to the Daily Caller, and those emails corroborated and backed up what was in some of these laptop emails. Plus, you had Bob Alinsky, who was, showing his emails. Like, here,
I knew it was going to be real because what are they saying? There was going to be a fake laptop repairman. There's a person.
That part, I'm still like, laptop repairman.
He keeps leaving laptops in repair shops all around the country, like a moron.
I was instantly ready to believe that he had lost a laptop. Could he have left it at a repair shop? Sure,
unless it was like James O'Keefe in disguise or something. Comes in with like a little mustache. You're like, oh, James O'Keefe, laptop repairman services. Then I'm like, okay, but
could somebody steal it from him while he's like on a bender?
Yeah. Anyway, Batya, thank you so much for your take on this subject. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have more Rising right after this.